Okay, let's get it out there. Distraction is a thief. It robs us from the most important thing that's important to us as human beings, and that's our time. Um, it kills momentum, it drains us of clarity, and it keeps us away from what we're trying to achieve in our creative practice. So, what does that look like? The album is still on the hard drive. You're still trying to finish up the clothing line. You're on your third sketch. The event idea is in your mind. You may have wrote it down somewhere, but you haven't taken any action on it. And that's a common theme, right? Like most of us go through this phase or go through this process where we have ideas and we have things that we want to do. And it's not that we don't execute them or don't have the ability to, it's that they are delayed in their execution. And a lot of that is due to the distractions that we have in our lives. So, again, we know and we acknowledge these things and we acknowledge the fact that distractions are real. We live in a world where we have so much access to technology and information, and there's so many things that can occupy, space and time in our minds, right? And it can keep us from moving forward creatively and achieving what we aim to achieve. So if you like me and it's you, I want to help you identify systems to protect your productivity from the thief of distraction. And because this is the most important and the most powerful move that you can make. We need our distractions out of the way so we can complete what's important to us. And then we can serve the people that we're creatively meant to serve. So I think that, I want to start off with talking about how distraction is a pain and how it really cripples us from moving forward creatively. And I think some people have their ideas of what distraction is, but just for the sake of this conversation, I want to define it from the onset so we can make sure we're on the same page. So, my definition of distraction is anything that pulls you away from where your full attention should be. And then what causes that distraction? Like what does that constitute? Is what constitutes being a distraction? Again, it's things that dilute your clarity for your creative practice. So that's the first thing that it does. It steals clarity. You know, it steals the direction from your practice and it becomes blurry to you and others who experience what you create. So you begin to move scatterly and without intention. And what are those signs? Like, what are those key signs that we can look to say, hey, my clarity may be getting diluted here? You start to say yes to partnerships that don't support your future vision. You begin to work on projects that don't align with where you want to go in the future. And then you spend a lot of time, well, not a lot of time, you don't spend any time reviewing your progress to see if it's in alignment with your future. So that's the first thing, that when you start to realize that you're operating in distraction, your clarity is diluted. The second thing is you begin to lose focus. And it shows up in three ways primarily when you begin to lose focus. You either don't know what you need to focus on, and then you end up doing whatever feels best to you at the moment. Uh, you may know what to focus on, but you allow external forces to drag you away from where your full attention should be, or uh, what psychologists call context switching, which is you repeatedly switch from different tasks over and over from one thing to another very frequently. So you don't spend concentrated, focused energy on the one thing that you need to complete, and then you move to the next thing. You find yourself working on 100 things at the same time. And even if they get finished, they don't get finished with the effectiveness and the efficiency that it could have been if you were able to focus on that particular task, very succinctly at that time. And then when those two things begin to compound, when your clarity gets diluted and when you begin to lose focus, you ultimately start to live unintentionally. So when you don't have a daily intention, artists and creators, we fall into this reactive workspace where we start to react to opportunities rather than be proactive. And then that's when opportunities feel like a drain. That's when it feels more like a burden than a joy. That's when it starts to feel heavy and it starts to feel like a weight, if you will. And then there's research that finds that, intentional planning, from creatives, you're 23% more likely to hit long-term project milestones. So without that daily intention for where you want to be, you'll end up accepting and defaulting to taking on whatever the wind blows instead of designing your life and designing your creative practice and putting yourself in a position to take you where you want to go. I think the the danger of being in this prolonged state is that it creates erosion for your creativity. You start to lose, your spark. You start to lose your energy in terms of being creative. Like your ideas get minimalized. You don't have the same level of joy and focus when it comes to creating, and it starts to develop this bitter root that starts to show its way. Starts to show its head because you find yourself not knowing where you need to be, not knowing where you need to go, losing focus and losing clarity in the process. The problem with that bitterness, it starts to develop into resentment as well. And then resentment starts to show up in procrastination, perfectionism, or more noticeably, I believe it shows up in self-sabotage. So you start delaying the very work that you need to do to move your creative practice forward because of that resentment that is set in, that language that says, will this work this time? Or I'm not sure if this is going to work again. Or I tried this idea before and it didn't work. Will this new idea work? And you start to become very pessimistic in your practice, and you start to really question yourself and your ability, and question the fact that are you able to do the thing that you set out to do creatively? So that is the pain point of when we deal with distractions and we navigate, distractions as a creative. So you need to understand what is the benefits of having a more productive creative practice. Because at the end of the day, distractions aren't leaving. They're not going to go away. They're going to be here. And as technology continues to evolve, we're going to have a lot more things to be distracted with. So let's set the stage for what you're actually losing out on or what the benefits are when you are productive. But before we do that, let's talk about what productivity is not. Because we think it's just more and more and more of something, more output, but that's not the case. So productivity is not grinding. And what is grinding? By self-definition, it's creating unintentionally with no end in sight. So you're always working, you're always producing, you're always creating, and there's no end to it. And there's no intentionality behind it. So you may create a new album, or you may create a new song, or you may start writing a new book. You may start creating a new sketch for a clothing line, but it has no focus. It's like, what am I doing this for? Who is it for? And where is it actually going? So it's no end in sight. It's no deadline. You just work, work, work with no intention. And then productivity is not hustling. And what is that? It's working in a state of hurry or worried in any direction. So when you find yourself always worried, stressed, always trying to produce to get to the next thing, that's an issue. And working with that mindset and working with that energy, it's not productive, because hustling just wears you out. It burns you out. It tires you out, and it doesn't lead you to where you want to go, because it could be in any direction. And when you work with intentional productivity, you work with the focus and you work with a desired end goal in mind. So what is intentional productivity? It's working with predetermined goals aligned with your artistic vision. Your artistic vision is where you desire to be in the future. That feels free, it feels authentic, and it feels honest within. You know, our input is the work we put into our creative practice, and it should be based on that truth. So how does this intentional productivity benefit you? Again, the first thing it does is it puts you in a full alignment with your artistic vision. So you begin to do what matters most for your career and what supports your artistic vision for your future. The next thing that it does is it starts to maximize opportunity windows. And what is that? It means that you create more opportunities intentionally. And then opportunities come from when you're active, productive, and positioning your creative works to be experienced by those that matters. So the right target fans, the right tastemakers, the right collaborators. You intentionally put your work into position for the people that it matters the most, and you're not just trying to shoot for anybody. You're not trying to acquire just any person. You're very mindful and very intentional about who the work is for and who it serves. And then also it puts you in a potential stage to have higher revenue opportunities. So a focused and productive artist creates more opportunities to generate income through more albums, more merch drops, more chances to monetize on content, for example, and it begins to fuel sustainability for your creative practice. Because if you don't put anything out, if you don't have anything to be consumed or anything to be purchased or experienced, then you're decreasing your chances of generating revenue. You're limiting your own income potential. So that's what being focused does. It puts you in a better position to make more money in your creative practice. So since we talked about, the pain of being distracted and what the benefits are of intentional productivity, I want to put this into practicality. I want to put this into a strategy. I want to be able to tell you in so many words, what do you need to physically do to put yourself in a position to be more productive and to be less distracted. So I like to say that you got to have a come to Jesus moment with yourself. You got to ask yourself immediately, like, what do I actually want to do? What do I want to create? What do I want to release? What is my actual intention for what I'm doing? You got to get very clear on exactly what you want to do. And to get out of this reactive state and to get out of this state of just working and working and working without knowing what the potential work is for. And then you want to ask yourself, what actions do I need to take to move my creative practice forward? So once you get clear about what you actually want to do, then you got to start thinking about how you can break this into tasks, how you can break this into actions. Because it's one thing to have this abstract thing in mind to say, I want to release an album. Sounds good, but when? Sounds good, but you have to start to break down what that actually looks like. How many songs is on the album? When do you want to put it out? Who's going to be involved in the project? You want to start to really carve out those specific goals and to put them into context so you can start to identify when these things can get done and who needs to be involved for you to do them. I think another aspect of this is when you set your goals, you want to set your goals into things in which you can control. You don't want to make it contingent upon external factors because that helps you stay motivated, inspired, and persistent in achieving your desired goals. So, kind of some of this I just touched on recently, but when you set a goal and when you decide this is exactly what I want to produce or create, and this is what I want to get done, you want to ask yourself a series of questions. You want to think about how specific is the goal. You want to get very specific. You don't want to be abstract in this process. You want to have an objective. You want to have a key result. You want to have a number, and then you want to have what you're actually doing. 3 albums, 2 songs, 1 video. You want to get very clear and very specific. And then next, you want to measure it. You want to be able to say, okay, how will I measure this? How will I know if I'm getting towards my intended goal? Like, so if I know I want to release 3 albums and I understand that conceptually, okay, how many songs do I want to release for each album? And then how can I know when I'm towards the end of completion of that? So if I want to put 12 songs on 1 album, when I get to 4 songs that's associated with that album, I can measure it. I'm getting closer to where I want to be. And I know where my begin point is and I know where my end point is. And then I think this is probably the most important thing you want to ask. You want to ask yourself, how realistic is this goal? Because some people will say something like, oh, I want to release an album and I want to make $3 million in 2 months, but they haven't even made 10,000 or they haven't made 5,000. It sounds good. And, it's not to distract you or to keep you away from what's desired in your heart. But you want to be realistic in the sense where you want to have something that you know you can achieve. And the reason why I say that, because that builds confidence, it builds security, it builds your self-esteem. Once you see that, oh, I can generate 1,000, let me shoot for 5. I can generate 5. Let me shoot for 10. I can generate 10. And then you can have building blocks to work off on because you built the confidence and the self-esteem to know that I can do this. Whereas that if you shoot for a very high unattainable goal and then you miss it, then you set yourself up for being discouraged, for being upset, for being angry, or being upset and having all of these negative emotions tied to the fact that you couldn't achieve what you set out to do. And then you want to ask yourself, does this goal align with my creative practice and where I desire to be? So once you establish it, you got to establish what the goal is. You got to sit back and say, how is this and what I want to achieve taking me where I want to go? If it's not, then you need to revisit why you have that goal in the first place. You got to be mindful of that because you can continue to achieve goals, and then it can take you in a direction that you don't intend to go. So you want to be mindful of that. And then another thing that's very important is time. When will I be done? When am I expected to reach this goal? You need a time frame because without a time frame, you open yourself up for the possibility of something getting done in 1 week to 1 year to 2 years to 2 months. It's too flexible in a sense where there's really no way to even measure or gauge if you're on the right path to get this done. So you need a time frame so you can hold yourself accountable to that time so you can know whether or not you've reached the end goal or not, or if something needs to be adjusted, or things of that nature. So once you define and establish what goals are important, you want to take a step back and you want to begin to audit where your time is going. You want to be able to assess what's getting in the way. Because once you set these goals, now you have to limit the distractions that can get in the way from keeping you from reaching them. So the first thing, you want to identify what's interrupting your productivity. And I would suggest breaking this up into two ways. What's interrupting your productivity internally, and also what's interrupting your productivity externally. So internally, what is getting in the way? Am I getting in my own way? Is it my self-esteem, my lack of confidence, my unassurance? What is stopping me from moving forward in the thing that I said I want to do? I have to get that audited because now I need to be able to position myself to know what assistance I may need to be able to eradicate those internal issues or those internal feelings so I can free myself up to be able to achieve what I want to achieve as a goal in my creative practice. And then again, externally, is it other people? Is it technology? Is it too many competing priorities? You have to be able to pay attention to what's actually distracting you from this particular productivity, and it's becoming a time suck and keeping you away from achieving what you desire. And then you want to identify when is the productivity interrupted. What time of day is it? Is it early in the morning? Is it midday? Is it in the evening? What about the location? Is it the environment? Is it things in my environment that are distracting me? And then what days of the week does this take place? Am I more productive Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday? Less productive Thursday, Friday, Saturday? Like begin to identify, the time of day, the day of the week, and the locations and when these distractions are taking place so you can begin to audit what's getting in the way. Um, and so you can start to begin to assess how you can have a strategy for it. So after you figure out your goals and after you audit the time and you see what's getting in the way and where it's going, now you have to build a system around you to protect your focus. So now that's there's a lot of different ways in which you can protect your focus, but I'm going to give you some of the things that I've learned over my, creative career and just as a person, what helps protect focus and the different elements you can have in place to design a system around protecting your focus. The first thing I would suggest is you want to keep God first in everything that you do. Because at the end of the day, no goal is set, no intention is set without it being first in alignment with what God says about me and what God wants me to do. If you don't align your goals with if you don't align your focus with keeping God first, then you run the risk of them being derailed. You run the risk of further distraction. And then you run the risk of getting to a place that you didn't want to be because it's up to your own self and not being led by God first. So that's number one. Number two, you want to create a planning schedule. You want to set aside time to actually plan. And the way I like to think about it, I like to plan in weeks, in days, and in quarters. So you want to choose a quarterly review date, preferably 1 month before the quarter ends, to establish the priorities going into the next quarter. Then you want to choose one day a week. I like to preferably choose Sunday because to me that's when the beginning of the week starts to map out your creative priorities. So you want to start the week off saying, okay, this is what's important this week, and then beginning assigning the priorities to each day that's relevant to what you decide that's of priority. And then you want to have a daily review time. So you want to review your progress for that day. So whatever you set out to do that day, you want to ask yourself, did it get done? If not, what happened? What got in the way? What was in what was in the way of me not finishing what I set out to do? That way that you can take that knowledge and take that wisdom into the next days so you can start to implement, what can help you get, begin to move forward as you begin to continue to review your progress. And then I think what's also important is you want to work in time blocks. And I mentioned this before in previous episodes, but you want to set the stage to complete deep intentional work within a focused manner, uninterrupted. I'm going to probably preach about this book for the rest of my life. I'm not going to get too deep into it, but I would highly encourage if you're a creative entrepreneur, artist, or anybody, if you're looking to be more productive and maximize on your time, read Jordan Rayner's Redeeming Your Time. He gives a very thorough strategy on how to effectively build and manage time blocks and just manage your time and redeem it in a way that's biblically accurate in reference to how Jesus lived his life. So please read that book. But one of the elements, again, I want to pull out of it is working in time blocks so you can do deep work. And deep work is just that focus, uninterrupted, intentional work towards a specific goal. Again, we probably as human beings max out after 45 minutes. So even if you work in a 2 to 3 hour time block, you want to put breaks in between those 45 minutes as well. So you can bring your best effort and energy forward to whatever it is that you're working on. And then you want to remove tools that create distraction. So again, we live in an age of information, age of technology. There are so many things that can keep us distracted. Text messages, emails, social media, friends, family, everything. I mean, there are so many things that get in the way for what we want to do. So you want to be able to remove these blocks as best as possible. You want to remove these distractions as best as you can. So if you're working, put your phone in another room. Work in a quiet place, a quiet environment, a serene place, a place that gives you energy. You know, you want to keep the internet tabs closed. Like, so when you're working on one thing and you're using your computer, don't have 100 tabs open. I'm telling you, something's going to come up, or you're going to think about something, you're going to click on it, and you're going to find yourself down a rabbit hole doing something totally different than you aim to do. You want to design your workspace to set the stage for distraction free work as best as you can. If you work from home and you can't do that, find some locations to work at. Start doing some research and start thinking about what environment that you like to work in that keeps you productive and keeps you focused. I know for me, I got to cut YouTube off, because I'll cut YouTube on and I'll start watching different podcasts that I like, and I find myself totally distracted, getting good information probably, but is it really good if it's keeping me away from what I want to do at that particular time? Probably not. And then you want to build accountability into your routine. So I think about this in two ways. Deadlines create accountability. You want to be able to create specific deadlines within your community setting so you can make sure that when you have these deadlines you put out into the world, now everybody knows, or people that's in your community are very clear about what you're aiming to achieve. So one thing that I particularly do is I have a group of friends that I work closely with, that are close collaborators with, that I set deadlines with. So it's helpful for me because we work together. So we're all on these specific deadlines, but I call it like an accountability circle, whereas that I'm in partnership with these people. And I say, for example, I'm want to release this album by May of 2026. And then we start to reverse engineer what that looks like. So, okay, great. If you want to release this album by uh, that time in 2026, then here are some of the specific steps that we need to take. We need to get the album mixed and mastered. We have to finish the songs. We have to get all of the right collaborators in place, and then we can be able to create a schedule that puts us on pace to finish it at that particular time. So, with that being said, it also serves like a check-in system. So when you partner with this, for example, this mastermind group, this accountability partner, um, you want to do it repetitively and consistently. Set a date, time, and frequency in which you do this. Do not leave it up to chance. Don't just have random calls or random check-ins. If you do, you're going to run the risk of not completing what you're aiming to do, and you're going to lose productivity. And then again, it's not necessarily having someone in the details of what you're doing, but it is someone that you can have in place that can listen and to can hear what you're aiming to achieve, and all in some way serve as a guide, serve as a coach, consultant to helping you reach that specific goal. Because I found some research that according to PMC, they said that someone simply knowing your work made visible to others, someone who's just aware of what you're doing and has the space to hold you accountable, it increases your effort and execution tremendously. And then what does it do immediately? It combats what they call social loafing. And social loafing is basically when you put less effort into what you do when you're unobserved. So it's one thing when I'm working in silos and I'm working by myself and there's no accountability around me, I can easily find myself drifting off, easily find myself not finishing what I said I was going to do at a specific time. And it works because there's no accountability to be questioned on. So no one can say, "Hey, I know that you wanted to release, this album at this time in 2026. How is that going? Where are you at? How far have you gotten along?" Because without that, then I find myself, I can easily kick the can down the street. I can easily move the idea down the road. So that's why it's important to build that accountability system in, just so someone can check in on you and have the permission to check in on you to make sure that you're going in the direction that you said you wanted to. So remember, external accountability increases your execution. It's just very important to have someone that's on your side that wants the best for you, that you can check in with, that can make sure that you're going where you aim to be. So just for some final takeaways and just to walk through this again, I just want to put this into perspective. Again, first thing you want to do is you want to clarify what's important to you. And just for the sake of this conversation, clarify what's important to you for the next 90 days. Uh, I used the SMART framework when I talked about how to actually measure that and clarify your goals. You want to make sure that it's something you can identify, very specific, something you can measure, something that's achievable, something that's relevant, and something that's time sensitive. And then you want to audit your distractions this week. Pay attention to what's stealing your time. Pay attention to what's taking you away from your creative practice and when. Pay attention to those things, audit them, make notes of them so you can take it into the next step, which is set non-negotiable focus times daily. You want to protect this time at all costs. I forgot where I heard this from. This is me paraphrasing, but I remember hearing that from someone. They said, "Don't let other people's wants become your emergency." So people are going to always ask us for things. They're going to always say that they want things, and it's always going to seem urgent. And chances are, for the most part, it's probably not. It doesn't mean that it's not important. It doesn't mean that we shouldn't help people out. It doesn't mean that we shouldn't, show up for people. But if it's up to a person, they're gonna make what they want your emergency. It's gonna be a crisis to them, and they're gonna try to make it a crisis to you. So you want to get in prayer. You want to get in discernment. You want to get healthy counseling around you to start figuring out better ways to manage what people want and how to help and serve people, but also to be able to protect your time and to protect your focus and to get what you need to get done so you can move your creative practice forward. And then you want to remove tools that create distraction. Set aside anything that is a time suck. And then you want to build accountability around your routine. Let others know what you're doing, and then let their consistent presence serve as a way to move your creative practice forward to where you want to go. Again, some distractions are very noticeable. Some distractions are small and undetectable. I think the important thing is anytime I'm in a place and in a space where I'm being taken away from where my focus should be, I would label that as a distraction. Should we be flexible? Yes. Should we help other people and serve other people? Yes. But is it at the expense of your creative practice and what God has set out for you to do? Pay attention to that. Because in the end, God is calling us to be productive and where He wants us to be. People need what we have to offer into the world to be able to help them and where they are in their lives. So your work matters. What you do matters and what you produce matters. And you want to be able to protect it and you want to be able to show up for it and not find yourself thrown to and fro by distractions because they're coming and they're going to be here and they're not going anywhere in this day and age. So if this episode helped you, I just ask you to share it with someone else. Be sure to check in next week for the next episode. Thank you for watching. Thank you for joining Neak Creative Consulting. Again, I'm Neak. Be blessed.